On today's episode of Couples Unscripted, Ayana and I are joined by Natasha Mahtani, who's a relationship and divorce coach. We have an interesting conversation as we dive deeper into how to maintain a healthy relationship and also steps that you may want to take if you're going through a divorce in a divorce process. Join us today on Couples Unscripted. Let's go.
Hello. Welcome, Natasha Mahtani, to Couples Unscripted. We're excited to have you. It's been a long time coming just to get you on the show. We are in season 2, so we are excited to expand the show and have some guests on. So we're going to welcome you, relationship coach, divorce coach, knows all about relationships. We want to know your insight. I think just reaching out to you and knowing that you're a divorce coach, for us, that was interesting because you come from a different culture, and I think here in America, there's not much talk on divorce coaches in general. So I was like, this is interesting. So that's why we wanted to bring you on, just to highlight more about this divorce coach and what does this mean. I think people get to that point where they're in their relationship and they're in like a stuck zone and they don't really know where they want to go. And I think people do take that leap to get divorced. But they, like you said, when we had a conversation before the show, was if you had a coach, you would probably end up staying together. But people just jump off the deep end. So yeah, we're excited to talk to you today and more insight.
Yeah, and explore those steps in between. I feel like I want a divorce and actually getting a divorce because, I think you said in our previous conversation, there's a gap there. So you don't have to go to the extreme to divorce. So we would love to just get more insight and pick your brain more and your knowledge in regards to relationships and how to possibly prevent a divorce, or if you do go through the divorce process, how to best go through it to on the other end to be better positioned for your new life.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So can you just start off and just give us a brief background on who you are and what represents yourself, and so for our audience to get more information on you.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Natasha Mahtani, as you said, and I got divorced, well, separated 12 and a half years ago. And I was a life coach at the time. And as the time went on, I had lots of people kind of slide into my DMs and start asking me questions and just being like, what is it like? And, how are you supporting your child? And, other things. And then I had people who started coming into my DMs on Instagram and just being like, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm going through. What should I be doing? And the thing is, I would never, whether I'm your friend or your coach, I would never tell anyone like you need to get divorced or this is not right, unless obviously there's extreme abuse or something like that. But I just thought I really want to be able to support these women because a lot of the times, I don't even say a lot of times, almost every time I speak to a woman and she talks about her divorce, the number one sort of feeling is that she's failed. And I didn't want that. And like failure and shame are the two sort of biggest emotions. And this is, very prevalent in sort of like the South Asian community. But to be honest, it's amongst all communities. It doesn't matter who I've spoken to. And one of the kind of USPs of my coaching is that I have lived across the world in so many different parts of the world. And what I really understand about relationships is that cultural nuance and the cultural conditioning. And whether you are Chinese in Hong Kong or Nigerian, because I lived in Lagos for a bit, or Indian, it's that overarching feeling of failure and shame. And so 5.5 years ago, I went and did some training to become an accredited divorce coach in the UK. And I just started talking about it because, and I'd always say, I'm the divorce coach that doesn't want anyone to get divorced because, of course, I don't. But if someone chooses to get divorced, then I want to make sure that they feel fully supported. But the more that I started working within that space, the more I realized that there are a lot of people who don't need to get divorced if they'd had, if they'd
Right.
had a relationship coach, if they'd had a relationship coach. And so I did some further training to also be a relationship coach. At the end of the day, with almost every other aspect of our lives, if we have trouble, we have no qualms about going to a doctor, going to a nutritionist, going to a dietitian, going to an acupuncturist, going to a massage therapist. But when it comes to our relationship, it's very much like, oh no, we can work this out. Like we love each other, we care about each other, we can work this out. I mean, Roger Federer is a phenomenal tennis player and he still has a coach. So even if you are a phenomenal couple, sometimes you need that objective person and people just, I don't know. I don't know what the emotion behind not wanting to have a coach is. It's just that idea that we can talk it out. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I
Yeah.
think more people need the support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a fear of letting people in, but as you
Yeah.
stated,
And
even the best athletes have coaches because you can always
Mm,
improve upon your situation, your condition. I love the fact that call it coaching because I think some people may be afraid of hearing therapy. They may run from that. So if therapy is a
mm.
trigger word for you, allow yourself to be coached in your relationship. I definitely love that vantage point of it.
yeah, and we had talked about that a little bit in therapy. We actually go to couples therapy, and at first, we don't like the relationship's good. Like, we don't need, because I go to individual therapy, and I was like, let me just try a couple session. And
Mm,
just the things that she was able to pull out of us
But we
and
didn't even
like
see,
that
I
we
think.
didn't even see. And I was like, wow, this is so beneficial. And if I'm not communicating effectively, then she'll say, I don't, Yana, you could think about this in a different way, or you weren't hearing him. And I was like, okay, wow, I thought we were on the same page here. But we're people and we grow through time. We've been together for 10 years. So there are differences. And I feel like having somebody else in routine, having a coach or a
mm,
therapist it can just help. Like it
Yeah.
could never hurt the situation. It can only make you understand your partner even more. And that's like what we want to tell people. There's hope. You can talk with someone, even though if it's good, if you guys feel like it's good, you can still
It can
have
always
a,
be better,
it
I
can
think.
always
Yeah.
be a
I think that's a
benefit
good,
for
yeah.
you guys. And then that's important that we want to let people know
yeah,
that.
for sure.
So I definitely want to tap into more of your journey. And I know you said so you start off with a divorce coach, you realize people also need a relationship coach. So where are you
Mm.
currently now in regards to your career and how do you feel it has successfully helped people either stay in a relationship or transition once they are divorced into a I guess a better position for their lives?
Yeah. So I'll start with sort of couples that I've supported. So it a lot of the times it's couples who are together, and what I love is
Hmm.
that there's a lot of love there. A lot of times people come to coaching and they want to stay together and they love each other, and I love that because that's a great place to sort of start. And they come together. It's just that maybe they've experienced something where they've tried to have a baby or it hasn't worked, or they've experienced some sort of grief and they just don't know how to speak to each other anymore. And what's interesting is that a lot of the times when they're in that situation, they don't want to hurt the other person, so they don't say the thing. Right. And it's not coming from a place of like, I don't want to speak about it. It's coming from, I don't want to talk to them about this because I don't want to hurt them. But in not talking about it, it's hurting them more because then resentment is building up and then we're trying to mind read and trying to figure out what the other person is thinking and second guessing, what the other person might want instead of just speaking about it. So for couples like that, what I actually do is when we do a block of sessions, I do 2 individual sessions first. So I won't ever speak to a couple just
Mm.
together from the very first day because each person needs to have the safe space to just say what they want to say without worrying about what the other person is like going to feel, but also saying it in a way that they don't feel judged by the other person. Because a lot of times if people are, in a situation where they want to say something and they haven't said it and they've been holding back, they get to the point where they feel like the other person's not really listening, or they're listening to respond rather than active listening. And so when we do individual sessions, they get to like say it. So some of the things that people have admitted in individual sessions, and then sometimes gone on to say, please don't bring this up when we are together because actually I'm not ready to tell him yet. And I'm like, all right, but at least that's a starting point, and then we can navigate how he or she is going to get to the point of telling their partner that that's how they're feeling about something. But at least in that safe space, they can say it. And so when I go into the space with them together, I have that knowledge and can kind of try and navigate the conversation so that they can start communicating in ways that they probably should anyway, right? So that's kind of like in terms of like the couples and stuff. And then
Yeah.
with the divorce
Right.
side of things, I do find that most of the time, to be perfectly honest, it's women. It's women who are coming to, to see a coach after they've experienced divorce. And this is generalizing, of course, but I find that a lot of men just think, okay, fine, like that didn't work, move on, like, without taking time to go through that healing process. But it's women who come to that space. And I'm actually glad that they do, because I always say to people, like, you can leave that situation, but if you don't heal from it, you're just going to attract more of that. Because in a lot of ways, like, even though I'm not about blame whatsoever, I think that it's very important that people take personal responsibility. And personal responsibility is also saying, yes, this person did all of these things, but I allowed that person to speak to me like that or to say these things to me. And when you can take personal responsibility and learn and grow and heal from that, you're not going to repeat those patterns. There's a higher chance that the next person, that you're going to meet is not going to treat you like that. And so I think that the healing part of divorce is really, really important. And it's mainly women that are coming for it.
Can you touch back more on the fear component that you
Yeah, I was
stated?
gonna say.
Because I think that's super important. And I think a major thing for people to, one, identify that they do have that fear, and what are some best practices to overcome the fear of either the fear of possibly going through the divorce or even the fear of trying to work the relationship out?
Yeah. So with going through the divorce, it's just fear of the unknown. And also,
Hmm.
if we look around, sort of thing, everything, whether it's in the media or anything else or magazines, they always kind of portray this picture of a woman who's like really depressed or really sad, or you'll watch
Yeah.
movies, I don't know, Bridget Jones' Diary and other ones, and there's a breakup and she's sitting there with a massive tub of ice cream and completely miserable, and no one is showing divorced women happy. And so I really try and show that on my Instagram, because I'm like, it is possible to be divorced and
Yes.
to be really, really happy. But there's and that's where like kind of the shame and everything comes in, because as long as we are believing that. So when I first started speaking on my Instagram, even before I became a divorce coach and just kind of putting stuff out there about divorce, my biggest, and the reason I agree to do podcasts whenever I'm asked, or I pitch to podcast, my biggest reason for doing it, obviously, is not to encourage divorce, but it's because I think that there are so many people who are sitting at home who may listen to a podcast, who are so terrified, who may just hear me say, like, you will be good and you can be so happy on the other side of this, and just think, okay, and will leave that like situation that is not serving them or that is hurting them or whatever it is. Because the other thing is that people often, and I get this so often, women will say, "Oh, we're gonna stay together for the sake of the kids." Or I had one lady actually say to me, like, "Things are really not great, but I have a 3-year-old, so I'm just gonna," and she was about 25, and she was like, I'm just gonna make the sacrifice for my son for 15 years, and then, I will leave when he's 18." And I was like, Wow.
Yeah, the
Aside from the
misery,
fact that yeah, well, aside from the fact that
Yeah.
15 years with the wrong person can
Yeah.
feel
With
like
the
a
wrong person.
lifetime of loneliness as well. You can be so
Yes.
lonely in a relationship. But also, more than that, children are way smarter than we give them credit
Mm.
for. Like, fine, it's fine when they're
Definitely.
3 and they're really dependent on you and they're looking up at you with, like, big, big eyes, and all they see is like how amazing their parents are. Wait till that child gets to 12 and 14. They can, or even younger, 8, they can sense when something is not working or when people aren't like really loving on each other, and they can sense it. And you don't want your children growing up
Yeah.
with that. They're better off with two really happy parents who are separated than two parents who are together who don't want to be together.
And how do you then coach that? Because I know she's thinking that's a better decision for her and her family, but then
Mm.
it's what about choosing you and your happiness?
Mhm.
Like, how do you coach somebody who's in that mindset of, I'm going to stay, but it's like,
You do harm.
you're doing harm to
Yeah.
yourself and actually like
The
to your
child.
child.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a journey, right? It's a process. It's not going to be
Yeah.
initially, but we would kind of look at what is it about her beliefs, her value set, like the things she grew up listening to, ingesting, hearing, that has made her believe that not only that should she be together in a couple, because that's one element of it, but that she should be the
Right.
one making all the sacrifices in order to
Okay.
stay together for their child. And a lot of the times it comes down to that's what they saw their mom do. You know,
Yeah. I was
that's
going to
what
say,
they
do you
might have
see a lot
seen
of
their
women
mom
who are
do.
sacrificing in their relationships? Like
Yeah,
when it comes to divorce and yeah.
I had to tell someone recently, she was talking to me about her child, and she was like, I don't think she's happy. And, she puts up with him speaking to her in this way. And she was like really upset about it. And she kind of mentioned it to me a few times. And I had to turn around and say to her, like, I'm really sorry, but where do you think she has learned this? This was modeled to her, and I was close enough to the person to be able to say it to her, but this was modeled to her and is still being modeled to her by her mom. And so now she is there and she just thinks it's normal for him to be speaking to her like that, or for their relationship to not be as, as it is, or for her to be taking on the lion's share of whatever it is. So, yeah, it's constantly modeled to us. Like we got it from somewhere. We didn't just, wake up one day and
Yeah.
think, yeah, my
Yeah.
life is about
It's
sacrificing,
learned.
especially as a woman.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You definitely do learn from the mom.
Yeah, I think our
And
upbringing,
families,
yeah,
your upbringing has a
yeah, the
lot to
upbringing
do
has a
with.
lot to do with it. And I think even speaking on the American society of it,
Mhm.
and it's taboo to divorce thing, or at least it was, and now it's the extreme where it's like divorce is the thing to do. You see so many people just go through the divorce process, but with no structure. And so I think it's because of our childhood, we have a vision on how a relationship should be, not knowing that maybe that upbringing and that structure wasn't actually the best representation on how the relationship should go. And I think it's important for people, and I think me and Ayana have done a really good job of trying to make our relationship and not a relationship from people we grew up witnessing or other things. I think we really done a good job of just make this our own thing and live under our conditions that best suit us. And I feel like it's hard for people to do that, especially if they are super religious or they have a
Mhm.
strong family set of values, to
Mm,
deviate from that and set their own type of values in their own new family. Because usually when you get with someone, you start a new family, everything is new. And I think it's important to lay your own foundation down to best serve that relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
absolutely.
100%.
So
One of the things I
question.
did
Oh, sorry.
One of
No,
the
go
things
ahead.
I
Sorry.
actually did recently was worked with a couple before they got married and kind of looked at the four big things of
Okay.
like,
Yes.
children, sex, money, and communication. And just to make sure that they were on the same page going into their relationship. And like, I suppose previously you would have that if you were, a member of a church or something, then it was quite common to, see your pastor or whatever and have those kind of conversations. But I think that as people are moving away, and maybe not necessarily everywhere, but in a lot of places, people are kind of moving away from
Hmm.
religion as the structure that it has been before. And that's okay and that's their choice, how whatever they want to believe. But then they need to make sure that they're taking some of those good practices from that into their relationship. And one of those things is making sure that prior to getting married, they are having those conversations. Or even if they choose not to get married and they're just together, having those conversations, because those are the four big things that people really struggle with in their relationships.
Question. So leading up into a relationship prior to someone getting married, would you have you ever advised someone not to get married or not to follow through with a marriage because you saw elements
Mhm.
within a relationship that I guess probably wasn't favorable for that person?
No. So as a coach, even if I think someone shouldn't get married, it's not my place to say that you shouldn't get married. And I guess in some ways maybe that's how therapy and coaching differ. But I would ask them a series of questions that would not push them in either direction, but would get them to reflect on whether this is what they want and whether they are okay if things didn't change or if things were like this. And then they get the opportunity to sit with themselves and reflect and think, oh yeah, no, actually that I don't want that. Or in some cases, I spoke to someone recently and it was that she was a little bit older, so she was in her late 30s, she had met someone, and so there was a fear component like, okay, this is not ideal, but if I don't, if I don't be with this person, then I might not find someone else again because I'm already in my late 30s. And again, this is fine. But then one of the things we would talk about is, okay, if this is not, like necessarily what you're okay with, like, is divorce something you are okay with? Because, and I know this is going to sound super controversial, but I feel like the pendulum is so swung so far the other way that now we have people who are so afraid of not having like the perfect relationship or having to get divorced that they'd rather not do it at all. And that's a problem because now if you don't do it at all and you do get to a certain age and then you do, and look, for women, it's let's take it one step further. They're then thinking, well, if I want to be a mom, I have like a biological clock ticking, or I want to be a mom by a certain age, or I don't want to be, look, at the end of the day, the way I see it is that you really don't know what is coming. If you had asked me, like, when I got married, I was really young, but if you'd asked me then, do I want to would I get divorced? My answer was no. But if you had told me that you're going to have a child and your ex-partner is going to choose to have nothing to do with your lives and you're going to have to solo parent, I would have been like, see ya, hell no. Like, I don't want that. But today,
Absolutely.
having been through the experience, and if I say, okay, I went through that experience and I'm happy and I'm healthy and I'm thriving and so is my child, it was fine, right? But I feel like the pendulum swung so far the other way, and now you just have a lot of people who are just not who are so afraid of the mistake of meeting the wrong person or marrying the wrong person because there's so much pressure. Because even on
Mhm.
Instagram we see the most beautiful weddings, and we're like, oh my God, it's like look at these things. That's what I want, and but we're so afraid of the divorce. And then another thing I will just say in terms of you never know what's coming next. There's a lady on Instagram. I can't remember her name right now, but it'll come to me. And I think it was last year. And she's a celebrity of sorts. Like she's got quite a large following. She had the most beautiful wedding. It was in New York. There was this stunning backdrop, like all hands went on her while a gospel choir sang this beautiful, beautiful rendition of like this song, and all hands were her. And it was, oh my God, I put it in like a saved folder, a wedding folder on my Instagram.
Yeah, it's like
And
this is
and
wild.
yeah, and less than 2 months later, she was diagnosed with cancer, and her partner has,
Oh,
and she's documented the journey, and her partner has obviously, like, supported her through the entire thing, and they've been documenting their journey. If you look at a before and after picture, like you look at the wedding, and a year later, you look at their content, no one saw that coming. And that's the point about life. We do not know what is around the corner. So choose what makes you happy today. And again, I'm not trying to say, oh yeah, just do it. It doesn't matter if you get divorced, like whatever. That's not what I'm trying to say. And I hope that's quite clear. But I'm just saying, like, take that leap of faith and trust, as opposed to being like, oh no, I don't like this element, or I don't like that element. I'm not sure about this, or this is not perfect, or no, Instagram says if he doesn't call me after the first date, then he clearly isn't interested. Like all these things that we're ingesting and listening to. And now we've got, a whole bunch of people who are just so afraid of marriage and so afraid of partnership and so afraid of commitment.
I
And
agree.
we need to like just inject some like, come on and give it a go attitude back into
Yeah.
I totally
life.
agree. And when I look at my friends, I look at some of my family members that are in relationships, I'm like, it's not like it's overcomplicated. I think there's such a saturation of information. There's this saturation of social media and what we're seeing and what's expected in relationships. And I say it's not supposed to be that hard. If it's hard and hurting
Yeah.
you, it's not it. If
Mm.
you're saying, "Oh, I just can't wait for him to go to work," or "Oh, I just can't wait for him to," I'm like,
Oh, I'm dreading them
is
coming
there
home.
love
Like,
there?
yeah.
And I think that
Mm.
there is this thing about, oh, this is what a perfect relationship looks like on social media. This is what I want. This is how I want people to perceive me. And then you just continue to be in that relationship because you don't want to be alone. And I've seen it, and it makes me so sad because I know what love feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my true love. I love him so much. And then when I see these relationships not working, and they're telling me all the things, and I'm like, I don't like, you can do what you need to do, but I don't think that this is working. Like, because it's hurting you, and you guys are in each other's, and I've seen like you guys are together because
Mm.
there's a fear of being with somebody else,
Or if you're
and now you
losing,
guys pity each
yeah.
other, so you just stay together in misery. It's such an interesting like psychosis. I'm just like, this is interesting, but you decide to stay because you don't want to be alone, and you pick the things that you like about them, and you tolerate the rest. It's
It's
what do they
madness
call it?
almost.
The 80/20, like 20, is it 80/20? Do you know the 80/20, which is like 80%? It's like I love, and then
80%.
20% is
Uh,
like I can deal with.
yeah,
People are
and
flipping
look, no
that.
one. Yeah, they are exactly. And no one's look, no one's going to be perfect, right? But when people,
Yeah.
and I say this to myself as well. Like if I am dating someone and there's something that I don't like a little bit that they say or they do, my new thing, I literally will like put my hand on my heart, like activate my vagus nerve and literally say, Natasha, stop judging. Because most of the time, when we go into this mode of like, I don't like that, it's our body's response to something that's happened in the past. And we are now dropping back into that space and going into that fight or flight. And I am not perfect. And there's going to be things that I do that they don't like. And I hope that they would get to a point where they're like, it's okay. Don't judge. If you've got the big important things down, then all these other little things literally drop into your heart space and be like,
Yeah.
this is really not that important. Don't judge. Because that's what it is. We're judging. Let's be like really clear about that. And I do
That's
it
true.
too.
Yep.
Like we judge, but it's like the whole thing of like when you point one finger, three are pointing back at you. It's that. It's like,
Yeah,
look to
it is the
where
judging.
you can improve. Yeah, it's the judging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my biggest takeaways, I feel like you're really big on saying, do not skip the steps. There's steps and processes in everything. And in order to get the best outcome, regardless if it's staying in a relationship, deciding to get married, or deciding to go through a divorce, is don't skip any steps. And I think a lot of people who are looking for the perfect relationship just get on Instagram or social media, see it, and think I can get that instantly without actually going through the steps, going through the actual roller coaster that is relationships. And I think
Mm.
it's important to people understand like there are steps and processes in everything, and you have to be willing to go through those steps and go through those processes and flesh it out to truly get the result that you're seeking.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that sometimes social media hampers that because it's a bit like, give you a silly example. When I started a podcast, I listened to some of these amazing, huge, huge podcasts. And I want my podcast to be like that podcast, right? Because I see it online and I'm like, oh, that's what I want it to be like. Forgetting, aside from the fact that that person has now spent 7 years building their podcast, right? But that they have made so many mistakes and learned from their mistakes and then made it better. And here I am trying to come on in and have like my day one, like their day 957. It doesn't
It
work like
doesn't,
that. And
yeah.
it's the same thing in relationships.
Yes. Yes, yes. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I just feel like, yeah, there's a disconnect sometimes with relationships. Like people hold them a little bit dearest to their heart, and like we were saying previously, like they don't let it breathe and let people in. So you can equate it
Mm.
to so many different things. It's like you have to nurture this baby. If you have a business, if you have a podcast, if you like, you have to pour into it. And it just works the
Mm.
same as anything. Relationships. You got to feed it. You
Yeah.
got to listen.
Yeah. So I have another question. So now with the state of everything and how things are going, and just want to have a reflection on marriage. In today's society, in today's time, do you still believe that marriage is a viable thing?
Yes, I do. I think
Okay.
She still believes.
I still believe, not too cynical. Of course, I love love. I think that marriage is a viable thing for sure. I just think that we just have to look at it differently. That's all. So if we really deep dive into like why marriage exists the way that it does and get really like logical and take the emotion out of it, it worked it's a social construct, right? Like it's a social construct. It worked for people to be in like this marriage, forever and ever with their 2.4 kids and one. And so if we look at it from a logical point of view, like I still think marriage is good, but when I say change your perspective, what I'm saying is instead of looking at marriage as A, something that you have to do, or B, something that keeps you in a box, I'm saying look at marriage as something that's expansive, as two people coming together to choose to spend their lives together, to choose to forgive when they need to forgive, to choose to communicate even when it's difficult, to choose to listen even when they want to say something back to the other person. I listened to Simon Sinek recently and he said something that I absolutely loved. He said he was with his girlfriend and they were like having an argument, and he was like, she was like, you did this wrong and I did this right. And he was like, you did this wrong and I did this right. And they were going around in circles. And then he was like, wait, stop a second. And he said, okay, how about you tell me one thing I did right and you did wrong? And I will tell you one thing I did wrong and you did right. And it changed everything because then you started thinking about the positive thing the other person did and where you could have responded differently and vice versa. And it changes everything. It changes everything. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's pretty powerful. And I know that not everyone's going to be able to do it every time they have an argument, but imagine if every like 5 arguments you were able to do that once, you know, it's just such
Right.
a game changer for how you're responding to the other person. So, yeah, I'm all for marriage. I think we just need to change how we look at it and how we see it and see it as much more like expansive journey of togetherness as opposed to something that's restrictive. Like we're married, we mustn't do this. We're married, we must do this.
Yeah.
Just make it more expansive, and it by definition.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great way to say it is just to think of it as something that is more expansive because it is. And it's not, oh, I'm getting into this and now I can't do this and I can't go out and I can't, it's just always, oh, I can't do that when I'm married, or there are all these
Yeah.
restrictions. It's no, you guys are creating this life together and
Mhm.
there are no rules. You guys create your own path
Yes.
together. But I think it needs to be looked at in a different way. And I think you said that beautifully. And just looking at like the expansion of the relationship instead of it being like, oh, these are my freedoms that are getting taken away.
Yeah, I think like one thing for me, I had to learn to evolve certain relationship habits
Mm.
Mm.
once we got official and got in a
Yeah.
relationship. Like there are habits that I may have had previously. They needed to evolve. They needed to grow. They need to expand, as you stated, to be encompassing of the relationship that I'm in now. And it took me some the time to actually take a step back and reevaluate myself. That way I can get back into the relationship in the way it should have, because it is like y'all was saying, it's two people coming together, so there's going to be a little tension and things. But if I continue to evolve my habits and my thought
Right.
process in regards to relationship, it just made it easier to absorb those things and to evolve and flow within conversations. I had to improve on my communication skills. I went to thinking like, oh, I'm great at communicating, and then realizing, oh, these one word answers isn't
Mm.
communicating. It's, and I didn't realize that until she told me, like, hey, you're saying something, but you're not saying anything. And I'm like,
Mm,
let me work
mm,
on communicating effectively and actually, she always say, articulate what you have to say and then saying it and giving the space, safe space that she giving me.
Right.
Thank you to actually allow me to speak. So I think that's where I think a lot of people in a relationship have to understand your relationship habits, evolve your thought process in a relationship, and be open to expanding the relationship that works best for the two of y'all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think the evolution of self, like we
mm,
are growing as we go through time and we evolve in what we like and what we dislike and how we communicate. And I feel like if there is a lack of evolution of self and self growth, there can be problems in a relationship. I'm stuck in my ways, I am who I am, and there's that lack of growth, which I think that
mm.
you could agree with. Then there's problems and conflicts that arise if you don't want to grow into becoming compromising for that
Yeah.
person, really. And I've seen that. Stubborn.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
And
seen some
and
people
that's
like
and that's it. Like you hit the nail on the head. It's not, it's not about it being perfect. It's that willingness to grow. If you have to have a willingness
Mm-hmm.
to
yeah.
grow, it's like people are changing and we're human beings. Like we are a part of nature. And if you look at like, a tree, for example, it will have different seasons and it will go into like fall and it will shed its leaves. And we don't judge the seasonality of like nature, and yet we kind of think this is how things are. We got married at like 25 or we got married at 28, and this is how our relationship is going to be. And I think that it's exactly that piece. It's the
Yeah.
growth. And I love, Niles, that you could acknowledge like how Ayana holds space for you, and thank her for it, because it's like looping back to what you said right at the beginning. It's about realizing that your relationship is about the two of you and not like your families and what like
Mhm.
the expectations of like, oh, but in my parents' relationship it was like this, or my mom used to do this, therefore I expect my wife to do that. Or for you to say, oh, like my partner, and for you to say like, oh, my dad used to do this, so I expect you to do that. Like it's acknowledging that now you've got your own unit. How do you like, what are
Right.
the parameters of your unit? What do you want your unit to be like and look like? And you can choose for it to be nothing like the unit you came from, or you can pick the best parts of the units you both came from and then bring them together. And I think that's a big piece of being together with someone, is almost unlearning a lot of what you learned. Not just learning new things, but unlearning some of the things that you grew up believing to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I love that. And I think that's what to say, teaching an old dog new tricks. That is the hardest thing to do sometimes, is to unlearn
Mhm.
Mm,
certain things that you grew up and you just knew like this is how it should be. And then you get to a certain point and you're like, in life, and you're like, oh snap, that's not how it's supposed to be. And it is hard. And I think it is the fear of pivoting and changing and new, because we don't know what's the results going to be. We haven't seen it, but I think that's the beauty of love and relationships, is we don't know what may hold, but if we are doing the things that I think we need to do, the beauty of what can come out of it is what you want. It is unknown, but there's a beauty to it, I feel like.
There was something that you had mentioned on our
Oh,
call. What did you
no, go
want to
ahead, Chris.
say? Okay, and you were talking about different cultures, and sometimes if you can understand each other's cultures, then you can create less conflict. And you were just talking about just like not understanding that person because they come from a different culture, and it can just be as little as just the things that they do, but how it just creates like arguments. And it's just, I don't know if you remember what we were discussing,
I
but I just
do.
wanted you to highlight just different cultures and just understanding that if you are with somebody from a different background, just understanding a little bit more about who they are. Because I think we've seen these like 90 Day Fiance, and we've seen all these different shows, and we do see a lot of intermixing of different cultures, but I think it's really important to understand who they are. And it can just be as little as like how they grew up and their family ties, but how a lot of that boils down to like them not understanding each other. So just you coming from a different culture and us having a lot of American just listeners, I just wanted you to speak on the culture if you get into a relationship with somebody else that's not from your culture, like how important it is to communicate.
Yeah, and it's not just communicating. Like I always say to people, it's not communicating that's key, it's comprehension. You can think you're
Yeah. Yeah.
communicating and the other
Hmm.
person, it's not landing. You could be speaking English, they could be speaking Spanish. Like it's not
There you
landing
go.
because they're not comprehending what you're saying.
Right.
But I think when we were talking on the call, the example I might have given to you that I often kind of talk about on podcasts is this. I once coached a lady and she was, Ghanaian, and she married someone who was British, and he was raised, in a very middle class family by a single mom, and he was quite quiet, and she was raised in like a really like loud kind of Ghanaian family, right? And she was also he was like one of two children and she was one of like several. And this was more about her unlearning rather than communicating, but because she then understood what was happening, she was able to communicate to him how it was making her feel. So they were living in the UK and she was working and so was he. And so they kind of split the household stuff. They had one child. And when it was his day to sort of do the dishes, he would leave a mug in the sink and think I'll get to it at the end of the day. And this was really, really bothering her. And I said, okay, let's figure out what is really going on here, right? And so I was like, okay, what is your sink like? Like, is it a really deep sink? And she goes, yes. I was like, okay, so can you see the mug and it's bothering you because you can see the mug? And she was like, no. And I was like, so what's the problem? Anyway, after a bit of coaching, what came out of it was that as a Ghanaian, having watched her mom, you know, look after the house and be the homemaker and take care of the house. One of the beliefs within Ghanaian culture was that if your house is not spotless, you're not a good wife. And so, even though now they were in a completely different space, right? They were both living in the UK, they were both working. She wasn't like a 100% homemaker. They were kind of splitting the chores. But the limiting belief she had is that if this is just sitting there and I don't go and wash it up myself, that I'm not a good wife and I'm not, and so then it was getting to her sense of self and her sense of worthiness, but actually she just needed to change that belief because her circumstances were very different to her mom's circumstances, where her mom had all day to tend to her home as a homemaker, as a stay-at-home mom. She didn't have that same thing, but the belief didn't change. And so when you can then understand that kind of cultural nuance for yourself, you can then communicate in a way to your partner to say, this is how this makes me feel because this is what my
Yeah.
belief is, or you can change it for yourself. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing like in the States, if you have, someone who's been born and raised in America and someone who's maybe like Latino, there, the cultural differences with regards to family and values and expectations of family to be at certain events and to be at certain things is going to be very different. That needs to be communicated. You can't assume that your partner is just going to be like, yeah, cool. Every second weekend, we're showing up at every single huge family function where your grandmother comes in and you think, and if it's someone who's just been raised with their like mom and dad and one aunt who lives down the street, suddenly being with like an entire family where everyone's up in everyone's business and everyone knows what everyone's doing, and you know what like your dad's cousins, daughter's new fiance is doing, like that's going to take some communicating. And
Yeah.
so I think
Yeah.
it's recognizing like in your own culture, what matters to you, what your values are, and then not just assuming the person will get on board, but being like, oh, this is really important to me. Or and like, again, coming back to what we said earlier, finding that middle ground that works for your unit, because now you're a new unit. And so, but communicating those things, but you can only do it when you understand what your values are. So when you understand that family means something
Yeah.
to you, or how tidy house means something to you. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about values, and I'm like, I tell my sister about those values. I'm like, what are your values? What are you looking for? What's important to
Mm,
you? So when you start thinking about what you need and what you want and what you crave in family and in relationships, then you can have some answers for yourself instead of just checking boxes. Is he tall? Is he skinny? Is that stuff is very trivial. and getting down to the nitty gritty. Who is this person? What culture do they come from? Is this how I want to raise my family? So I just think that's really important.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to see, I know we're coming to an end here, but I wanted to see what your biggest takeaway is, like just being a coach, how it's changed your life, and how, and if there has been any relationships or individual stories that have touched you and just helped you learn about yourself and how you want to continue your journey as a coach.
Yeah, oh gosh, so many. So many. So I always kind of reflect on the fact that I think you often attract clients that teach you the lessons you need to learn. And I know it sounds crazy, but I'll so often like have clients and they'll be saying something and I'll be like, that could apply to my life too. And here I am, like questioning them and giving them tips and showing them how to approach what they're experiencing. And I'm like, take some of your own advice, Natasha. So, I honestly do learn so much, even from my clients. But I think if there was one big takeaway that I would say to almost anyone, but especially women, it would be to be financially literate. So one of the kind of things I do now is I teach women how to invest. So I take women on a 6 week journey. I do it as a group coaching program, and it teaches women to go from like knowing absolutely nothing to being invested. And initially I would say, oh, because it gives women freedom and choices. And so if they're in relationships that are not working for them, one of the biggest reasons that women don't leave is money. And this way they can secure themselves. But it's not just about divorce. Like we talked about when I said you don't know what's coming around the corner. It's also death. Like you lose your partner and you have kids and you've decided to be hands off with like the investments and stuff like that. You're now left wondering what you're going to do with yourself or being dependent on your family. And also, if you are in a very loving relationship, being financially literate allows you to grow your wealth with your partner together. So I meet a lot of women who are, doing phenomenal jobs, running, businesses or, at the top of their game in like a law firm or, for a global hotel group, doing brand like communications. And they will get their bonus and give it to their partner to invest it. And that blows my mind. And then a lot of the times it's just because they've been conditioned to believe that women don't need to understand money or women don't need to talk about money or it's a bit crass to talk about money. And I'm just like, why are you handing over your bonus to your partner to invest it? Either do it together or do it by yourself. But you shouldn't be, because then I'll have women who will email me and be like, I really need coaching. My partner one day, and this was very recent, someone emailed me and she was like, he just upped and left. We didn't have therapy. We didn't have coaching. I've got 2 children. He had no money when I met him. I gave him so much of my life savings for our future. For our future. And because I was so busy with work and he was trying to build his work, he was just like, it's easy if I just do this, or I'll just put that in my name because you're not around to sign that thing. And then when he left, he didn't take any of that into consideration. And so where she was building of their future and pouring her life savings into him, and I do not blame her because she was looking at it as like, this is the person I'm with. We have 2 children. What's mine is his. And so it's our future. When he then left, and I've seen this many times. I mean, this was one recent email, but I've had it quite a few times where she did not see it coming, and now she has given up half her nest egg. And so, if there's one thing I could say to women, it's be financially literate, like understand money. You know, don't just be giving your money away, even if it's to the person that you stood at an altar and said that, you will love till your last breath. Like, oh, you can love them to your last breath, but understand your money. Know what you're doing with your money. Because when it comes, you don't see it coming at all.
It's a literacy. That's
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing to highlight because yeah, finances are huge in a relationship, but just how whoever is dealing with them, but each party should know, each partner should know
And to give
their
you the
finances.
confidence if something were to go
Yeah,
left,
if something were to go
having
left,
that
like
literacy, being
And just
confident
knowing
enough.
where all the assets are. Like if he only knows what's going on and then he's not in the picture, it's damn, what the hell do I do now? 'Cause I don't know
Yeah, you
anything.
want to avoid that.
And I
Exactly,
also wanted
exactly.
to, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say exactly. Like, that's it. Just understand where the assets are. That's it.
I wanted to highlight your 12 weeks of reflection journal that you
Mm.
have. So I just wanted to highlight where they can find it and then how that 12-week journal is set up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. I set it up like a couple of years ago. I sometimes forget about it. But basically, they can get it on Amazon. There's a link in my bio on Instagram, and they can find it on Amazon worldwide. What I suggest to couples is to get two copies of the journal, and to each have, one copy. And it's really short. Like there'll be a short page where you can, you just kind of read about that topic. And there's 12 different topics to go through. And it's everything from like trust and intimacy to like communication. And you just read that. And then there's like 4 or 5 prompts, like questions. And so the idea is for you to kind of take some time to reflect on where your answers are. And then what I suggest to people is come together on a Sunday evening. If you're not working, come together on a Sunday evening and just spend 10 to 15 minutes comparing your answers. And you really approach this not from a place of wanting the other person's answer to be a specific answer, or, questioning why your answer is your answer and their answer is different, but it kind of shows you where you're not in alignment because you've done the actual exercise individually and privately, but then you're coming together and it's like, okay, let's look at intimacy. And the first prompt might be something around what intimacy looks like to you. And suddenly you're like, oh, it's this. And your partner is like, actually, for me, it's this. And that's great because then you can bring your those 12 kind of pillars of your relationship into alignment. So that's sort of the idea behind it. It's for people who are like, oh, maybe we can't afford therapy or coaching, or maybe we don't have the time to do it. For like, I think it's like $10 or something, we can just get this journal that's exactly the same and go through the 12 pillars and see where we need alignment.
Self-help. So yeah, so if you
Yeah.
don't want to go out and hire anyone else,
Yeah, get the journal.
go to the journal, do it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you please just share your social media handles, how people can get in contact with you, anything else you want to promote? Please, this is the space and time for you to go ahead and let our audience know.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm mainly on Instagram at Natasha Coaches. I mean, I have a website, natashamatani.com, but I'm on Instagram every day. And so that's where most people kind of, slide into my DMs and chat to me or ask me things. I have just run 2 cohorts, or rather, I'm running the second one of her portfolio, which is teaching women how to invest. It's a 6 week. I say 6 week immersive. And the reason immersive is because it's live, first of all, because how many courses have you bought that are self-paced that you never finish? I don't know about you, but I think I have 4 that are outstanding that I purchased and
Yeah.
never have the time to finish. And so with her portfolio, it's live. It's once a week for 1 hour, but then you're also in a WhatsApp group. And what I've loved about it with cohort 1, they just finished, and now they know each other and they're in this WhatsApp group. And they kind of know what's on each other's watch lists. And the other thing that really irks me is a lot of women online will say to other women like, "Oh, you should go into like an index fund or an S&P 500 and you'll have 1 million by the time you're 65." And I'm like, who wants to wait till they're 65 to be
I
wealthy?
know.
Like, we want to be wealthy in the next 3 to 5 years so we can make choices, right? And so I
Yeah.
teach people how to stock pick. Anyway, the next cohort is going to be in January. So if anyone's interested in that, they can DM me on Instagram and I can send them details of that.
Perfect. Wow. We appreciate you, Natasha, for coming on the show and getting some insight on just being a coach and being a divorce coach. If nobody knew what that was, and now you know what it is.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to both of you for reaching out and also for your patience. I know we've been chatting for a couple of months.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Natasha. It's
Thanks,
been a
guys.
pleasure, and you have a lot of knowledge. And also, we definitely want everyone to go follow her on social media,
Please, yeah.
click the link for the 12 step, and then also you said January you have a
Her
financial
portfolio.
literacy course portfolio. Yes, so
Yeah.
any
Yeah, I might need
women,
to learn that
yes,
too.
Financial literacy is important. So we definitely want everyone to click in and go into that and set themselves up financially, which is very important with times going. I think that's major, and we're wishing you nothing but blessings and continued success.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching another episode of Couples Unscripted. We will see you next time.